We like to think ourselves as the heroes of our stories. But have you once considered how different everything would be if you allowed yourself to imagine being the villain? This is the dark side we fear not cross over. If we did so, do we become irreparably damaged and morally compromised? Or do we unlock new powers and new perspectives? More by circumstance than choice, I found myself debating this question over the last few months. I guess we are all feeling the pressure of the injustice of the world nowadays. As I emerged from the other side of this thought experiment, to my surprise, I have discovered a renewed source of personal strength, as well as an unexpected empathy for the destructive people in society. A permanent shift in how I see the world and people has taken place. I have to share that with you. It's time to update how you think about the world. To do that, I need to first tell you about your mind and why it has a desperate need to think of itself as the hero of a story. We think linearly. We desire to make sense of this abstract chaos that is time. There needs to be causality in life. Otherwise, what's it all for? You seek a purpose, a meaning. Do you have any agency at all? What is the biggest impact you had on this world, on other people? If we did not, did we ever exist? Our identities need stories like fire needs oxygen. We live and die by our stories. They are the narratives which shape our way of seeing the world. They are the sieves through which we reduce an ocean to a cup just so that it makes sense to us. And in all our stories, we are the main character. Sometimes we do it just for the plot. Other times, we fully immerse ourselves into fantasies of power and omnipotence. The constant is you as the central point of the story, the main character. For most humans, there are three levels of caring for the world around them. A. You care highly about your impact on the world. B. You care a bit about your impact on the world. And C, you don't care at all about your impact on the world. And then there are three paths our heart follows. 1, you want no impact on the world and others. 2, you want a positive impact on the world and others. And 3, you want a negative impact on the world and others. A1 is the life of a Buddhist monk. You care about the world, but you're content with not wanting. A life of seclusion and minimalism is the answer. A2 is the fantasy of the superhero. You care about the world and you feel the weight of all the problems of the world. You are ready for the sacrifice of body and mind. B2 is the compromise of a good citizen. Not that you don't care about the world, you care about yourself more. You would prefer if your impact is positive, but won't sacrifice comforts for it. All types of Cs, people who don't give a damn, as well as A3 and B3s, who want a type of revenge on the world, are types of villains. Cs are the most abundant. They don't care about anything but their own luxuries and safety. These Cs usually have some amount of wealth and did not have the most terrible lives growing up. They are usually not aware of their entitlement. A3s are the most lethal and destructive group. Though not high in numbers, they are highly motivated, intelligent, and capable with their anger directed towards anyone in the world, including themselves. Growing up, they've been mistreated, abused, and neglected by the world. Now that we have a better understanding of the main types of people who exist in society, let's move on to the heart of the matter, their relationship with the world. The most crucial thing you need to understand is that we all have a relationship with the world, It's like any other relationship with partners, friends, and family. It can be a loving relationship, or it might be filled with hate, resentment, anger, and toxicity. The world, as an object, exists only in your mind. It's an abstract representation that holds the totality of your experiences, which shapes how that relationship is colored in your mind. There is, of course, a real and an impossibly complex real world out there, but none of us know it. With its billions of people, subcultures, and values, it is as big as the ocean. You can't see or comprehend all of it. You try, but it slips your grasp. Based on the very narrow slice that is your experience growing up, you dip your cup into the ocean and say, "This is the world." You don't say, "This is my very specific and biased understanding of the world." No, you lay the claim that your cup is the world. Just like some had loving parents and some abusive ones, the world shows a different face to everyone, based on some random, shitty, extremely unfair factors. So your relationship with the world might be an abusive, violent, unfair one, or it might be a generous, forgiving, beautiful one. Most experience a single point on the scale. The wise have experienced both ends. So now our core idea is taking shape. We can't make sense of the world without stories. How we carry ourselves in our daily life is a result of the story we are in. The story we are in is shaped by our relationship with this dungeon master that is the world. Everyone's world is randomly generated, but looks as if it's the same to outsiders. Heroes feel they owe the world. Villains want to damage the world. And for most, it's a love-hate relationship. Our attitude towards the world is a result of our relationship dynamics. For a villain, the representation of their world in their mind is very different from yours. Their understanding is shaped by their very real, rough experiences that are perhaps different from yours. And without having lived their life, how fair would it be for you to judge them? So I guess one inevitable conclusion is that we are all children of the world. Some of us are loved, some of us are beaten, but we all improvise our next steps in the dark. Back to my story. Especially as an entrepreneur in London, this duality between being a hero and a villain became more real. I had chosen this path after quitting my job and moving to the UK in 2018. What has been remarkable to observe during this time is the radical change in the perception of entrepreneurs as they turned from heroes to villains in people's minds. I would dread being called in a comedy club or a pub and having to tell what I did for a living. This has especially been the case as the techno-optimism the world had for the Silicon Valley type of startups in early 2000s has been decimated as most of these companies turned into horrific beasts fueled by greed. Today, in an average conversation in an average pub in the UK, the introduction of "I'm an entrepreneur" would be met by bitter sarcasm. I've seen enormous potential to do both good and evil as a capable business creator. So the question of hero versus villain becomes even more pertinent. Irregardless of occupation, the same moral choices are there for most of us. There's always an easier path to money and power. That will mean you step on others. Maybe not visibly, but you know it. One irritation that's unique to entrepreneurship, I guess, is the irony. In this path, even midway in a sacrificial attempt to be a hero, you might be seen as the villain. People actually do have a point. It is easier to be corrupt as a business owner. It's easier to exploit people, dodge invoices, or game the system, and basically create harm. It's normalized as part of the competition. This brings us to our conclusion. My point is, don't be a C, but allow yourself to imagine a story where you are the villain. I found it to be a great tool that has broadened my horizons in understanding people and choosing from a wider scope of actions. At the very least, it's a great thinking tool like brainstorming. Once you have explored new paths, as you allow yourself to think, what would a villain do, you can then modify them to have a neutral or positive impact. One of Charlie Munger's favorite concepts famously was inverted thinking. For example, you ask yourself the question, how do I make sure my children have the least chance of success in life? By allowing yourself to think via a new mental circuit, you gain a new perspective. You don't become more likely to act that way, you become less likely. Now you understand it better, perhaps fear it more. So in essence, imagining yourself to be the villain in your story is an act of inverted thinking at its highest level. By thinking like a villain, you become less like one. You become stronger. You become smarter. You become a better hero. After I've gone through this phase, for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly understood people who would throw trash out their car window, scam others, lie, steal, manipulate, and exploit as second nature. I don't like them, but now I understand them. I understand why they are that way. They have been crushed by the world, and they are taking their opportunity for revenge. I know you don't want to be like them, but you need to understand them, and maybe you need their cunning too. You've been listening to The Pantheon. Consider subscribing for more video essays on humans.